Tonight's show is brought to you by children playing football in my backyard and using my patio door as the end zone, apparently. Bendetti Optics and you, our listeners. You know what? Let's be real here. I was kind of Josh Gates before Josh Gates. Just saying. What is up, all of you wayward souls, and welcome back to the Wayward Stories podcast. Wayward Stories is the podcast where we tell the tales of our adventures and our wanderings and our wonderings. How's everyone doing tonight? I am so good. For the first time in I don't know how many years, I can actually say I'm good, because I actually am, and it's awesome. And we've got a really cool episode, I think, lined up tonight that I'm really excited to talk about. I had the idea for this episode on my big road trip up to New Hampshire, and it has nothing to do with a road trip to New Hampshire, but I just had the idea while I was driving for 27 hours. So we're going to do a really fun episode tonight. We're going to catch up on a little bit of housekeeping and give you some updates on my new job, and then we're going to get into this episode. The idea for tonight's episode, just so you know what we're going to get into, is I have this really old backpack that's been around since the dawn of time and has gone with me anywhere, and it's finally reached the end of its useful life. And I think it's time to retire it to a place of, well, as the Brits like to say, pride of place. It's going to go up on the wall in the garage or somewhere and be retired to greener pastures. And it gave me a really cool idea about this, an episode idea to talk about pieces of gear that have gone with us everywhere and have become like friends, and use that to tell a bunch of stories that basically happened while I had this backpack. So that's what we're going to talk about tonight. But before we get into tonight's show and we get into that, let's do a little housekeeping. First of all, please rate, review, and subscribe. If you guys listen on Apple Podcast, please review. You, as it turns out, I found out you can't actually leave reviews on Spotify, but we do love the ratings over there. But on Apple Podcast specifically, you can leave reviews. So if you use Apple, please take the time to leave a review, and it would greatly help us out. If you'd like to be in touch, mywaywardstory@gmail.com. You can go over to waywardstories.com and use the contact form there, and also find my Instagram page and the TikTok and all the other things that we do. So that's housekeeping. Housekeeping's out of the way. Update on my new job, because a lot of you have been curious. I got a really, really nice email from our listener, Mary, basically saying I can't wait for the next show and to hear about how your new gig is shaping up. And that warmed my heart. And I know other folks have expressed interest in that. So, new job update is great. That's why I'm great tonight, because for the first time in like 45 years, I don't know, life doesn't suck so much. And it's a super cool job. My first kind of week and a half, 2 weeks really, that I've been on the job have been great. Basically, what I've done is, do my days on the desk and welcome visitors and orient them to the site, things I've been doing for 3.5 years as a volunteer. But on my non-desk days, I've been in my little cubicle that I got now and working on programs. I've got a really cool idea for some programming that's really underrepresented at Fort Smith. Like, we were super heavy on programming for the West, Wild West, westward expansion, because we primarily interpret the federal court period of the site. But Fort Smith spans 80 years, and it starts with westward expansion and a whole lot of the early explorers of the West that paved the way for what America would become, an expansionist policy, literally based out of Fort Smith. And I was like, we don't have enough on this. So this would be a really cool series of like informal talks and possibly a formal program presentation that'll probably turn into a book. So I've been deep in research on some of the early explorers, and that's going to be a lot of fun. Opening, closing the grounds, raising, lowering the flags, beginning of the end of the day, just basic standard stuff. We did the Fort Smith Christmas parade yesterday. That was super fun. Drug our big cannon Thor through the streets of Fort Smith. Anyway, it's been great. It's been super fun, and it's everything I could have hoped for. We're not out of the woods yet. We got to work our way into a more permanent situation with that over time, hopefully. But it's beautiful. It's wonderful. It's fun. And for the first time, and I can't remember when, I don't wake up with a knot in my stomach every morning, knowing that I have to go to work to do something completely fruitless to me that will not make me enough money to pay bills, but make some rich jerk somewhere even richer so he can play golf all week and call himself a CEO, right? At the expense of my back and my hearing and my health and well-being. First time in my whole life. That's not been the case, and it's kind of glorious. I get to do something educational. I'm being educated. I get to do educating. It's awesome. It's going well. So Mary, thank you for asking. I will continue. I'm sure it'll pepper its way into many podcasts in the future as things occur, just like archaeology has and everything else I've gotten into. So I'm sure you guys will be more than up to date as we go. But I do appreciate the email, and thank you for asking, and I am happy to report all is going really, really well. Oh, and one other quick note. One of our new listeners that wrote me, a really nice email a few months ago, Paloma, she had mentioned something about, have you had any ideas about, maybe doing a podcast where you just do like this broad overview of all the states you visited and kind of your impressions of each state? That is a really cool idea, Paloma, and that's going to happen. Actually, that's going to come up probably in the next couple of months. I have a couple of other episodes I think I'm going to make first because they're a little more prescient and timely, but that's been on my radar ever since you sent that, and I'm going to start working up a list of all the different states I've visited and my initial impressions and kind of start shaping that out. So when the time comes, that will be an episode. I think that was a really great idea. Thank you for the idea. So let's get into, with all of that said, let's get into tonight's episode. I'm going to show you guys who are watching on YouTube this backpack. Do you see this guy? It's ugly, it's old, and it's mid-grade. Magellan. I mean, I don't even know where they sell those anymore. Like, they used to sell them at Academy. Maybe Magellan's still a thing. I don't know. Super mid-grade backpack. You'll also notice, do you like my patch? This is my favorite patch I've ever had. North American Bigfoot Search. That's going to be one of the stories we tell tonight. Why is this patch on this backpack? I'm going to tell you tonight. This is a mid-grade backpack. It doesn't say anywhere, and I don't remember, 18 or 22 liters. It's kind of like a day pack that I made function as a multi-day pack many times over. But it has been a really, really good backpack for 18 years. Okay. Oh, you hear that? You hear the kids in the background? Sorry. Come back around. The reason tonight's episode is brought to you by children playing football in my backyard is because there's children playing football in my backyard. And instead of being a grumpy old man and going out there and be like, could you guys not use my yard for your football game? We're just going to go with it because you know what? I was a young man once that played football that spilled into God knows how many people's backyards, and they did not come out and scream at me. Okay, well, some of them did, but most of them did not. And in the spirit of the season and basically being a decent human being, let them have their fun, right? So if you guys hear kids playing in the background and voices coming through my patio door, that's what it is. My house is not haunted, much as I might like it to be. It's just kids playing football, and we're just going to roll with it because I need to record today. I'm in the mood. I've got the inspiration right now. I'm feeling it, so we're going to roll with it. Anyway, back on to the story here. This backpack didn't cost much when I bought it. The reason I bought it was because we were starting when we were filming for Hidden Histories. When we went and kind of rolled over from all the independent film work that we had been doing and finally got in with the right people, and someone asked us, hey, do you want to be a film crew on a TV show? We were like, yeah. And so I was going to be one of the two hosts in a two-host situation that we're going to go exploring. We were going to go and basically go after, it was kind of my idea to start with. Hidden Histories was the idea. It's like, let's go after the lesser known stuff, which now it's huge on TV. I like to think that I was ahead of my time. We just weren't very good at it, so we didn't make it. But it was kind of the stuff that's lesser known, not your standard upfront read in a textbook history, but some of the weird things that are all over the world. The Kensington runestone, the Heavenor runestone. I grew up in here, all these little things. And so I was going to be one of these to host, and I needed a backpack. I needed to be all outdoorsy looking, like it was kind of like, you know what, let's be real here. I was kind of Josh Gates before Josh Gates. Just saying. That's not, I don't mean that with any amount of seriousness. But that's kind of the idea. And this backpack came from me buying the gear I needed to start that first episode of the show. And we actually went and did the Heaving to Runestone. And that's actually the first story I'm going to tell you. The big story arc, before I start telling individual stories, though, of this backpack is, and the idea, the reason this is an episode, how many of you have a piece of gear, any kind of gear, that has basically, if you stop and you reflect and you go, you know what? This has been with me for a decade or 2 decades. It's been on every adventure I've ever been on. You know, I kind of touched on this when I bought Clementine and I had to trade off my Xterra, my Pro 4X Xterra. I loved that ride and it was like heartbreaking. I still miss it. To this day, I miss it. It's like losing a friend. When a piece of gear, a piece of equipment that helps you live the life you want to live, whether it's out there being a photographer, just an adventurer, a hiker, a paddler, it doesn't matter. When you have a piece that has always done its job, done it well, fit the needs of the purpose that you were attempting to enact perfectly, and did it well and never let you down and never failed you and made it through decades or multiple years, you don't realize how like they kind of become an inanimate companion. They're kind of like Wilson in Castaway, right? I mean, my Xterra, I just called it the X. It didn't have a cute name like Clementine does, but like it becomes almost a persona. It's someone that's there with you through everything, no matter who goes with you on the adventures. It can, people can pass in and out of your life that may have been on this adventure or that, but that piece of gear was there all along, and it becomes like this friend. This backpack has kind of been that, and it's followed the story arc of my life since 2007. And that makes it kind of a really cool framework within which to tell a broader narrative, right? About gear that's been there all along and does its job, and the value of that kind of gear, which again, this is mid-grade, right? This thing literally was not, a $200 backpack. Like if you go online right now, you try to find a backpack, it's like it has to be, oh God, what's the new one? Mystery Ranch. Like that's the biggest thing here in the last few years. North Face is always a thing. Like, and it's all name. It's all name. It's just like bicycles, Specialized bicycles. Miss me with that crap. Your bike, and in no way, shape, or form is worth $6,000. And I don't care what any of you bikers out there, how you feel about what I just said, you're wrong. If you think that there's a $5,000 value difference between a Specialized bicycle and, say, a Trek, a mid-grade bike that does the same thing just as well for just as long for $5,000 less, okay? You're buying a name because you need to be cool to fit in with your friends when you buy something like a Specialized bike or a Mystery Ranch. Not to say they're not good and high quality. They are. The problem is they're no more high quality than a lot of mid-grade stuff. They just got lucky, fell into popular culture, popular vernacular as the thing that says, look at me, I'm the top dog in this neighborhood and everyone wants to be my friend. They got lucky for whatever reason. Not to say they're not good. They're excellent. But they're not $5,000 more excellent. Do you see what I'm saying? Do you follow? Just like this backpack. It's a mid-grade backpack. And it served its purpose for 18 years. And to be honest with you, how many times in my life, like I had a pair of Merrell water shoes once I paid almost $200 for, literally didn't make it through a summer. And I had a pair of freaking Wolverine water shoes at one time that lasted me almost a decade and were way better than those Merrells ever were. And the only reason they ever died is because I accidentally left them too close to a fire to dry out on an overnight float trip. Actually, we're going to talk about that float trip tonight. And they melted. I screwed it up. And they cost me $9 on clearance at Academy. And they're Wolverines, which is a mid-grade brand anyway, right? But I buy a pair of top dollar Merrells, and they have completely been destroyed in a single float season. So sometimes all you're buying is a name, right? So mid-grade stuff is where it's at. If you want to get bang for your buck, mid-grade stuff is where it's at. This backpack was one of those things. Magellan, no name, whatever, sort of a name, I don't know. But it always worked, and it made 18 years through some of the harshest conditions anyone could ever put it through. And I figure, with all that said, like, let's just kind of start talking about it. Like I said, we started with Hidden Histories. And in Daring Hidden Histories, we did a bunch of really cool stuff. I've talked about it sporadically over the course of this show. The last 106 episodes, it's come in and out. I've told probably some of these stories, so they may be repeated tonight. But we're just going with it. This pack starts with us exploring the Heavener runestone and trying to see if there's any validity to the idea that Vikings could have made it this far into the center of America, right in the heart of southeast Oklahoma, right? We know they made it to Nova Scotia. We have archaeology that proves that. There's a longhouse that has been excavated in Nova Scotia. That makes sense. Did they make it all the way to Heavener? The unfortunate answer is probably not, because as I can tell you now, as an archaeologist and anthropologist, if they were here, there would be some evidence of it, and it would have come out of the ground at some point, because people have been looking for this connection for 50, 60, 70 years now. There would be something that cropped up other than this weird, enigmatic stone. That breaks my heart. I want it to be. I want it to be real. But the practical, rational, critical thinking scientist that I'm supposed to be says, but there's no evidence to support it. Even the script itself does not support itself as being from a Viking explorer. It just doesn't. You guys can look into that if you like. The Heavener runestone is fascinating. There's a few books about it. I would say the Bible on the Heavener runestone, though it's heavily skewed towards it being legitimate because she was a hometown gal, was written by Gloria Farley. It's called In Plain Sight. You can find it, buy it. I've got a copy. I've had a couple of copies. I knew Gloria Farley. I met her before she died. She was a hometown gal, super into the idea of it being legitimate. It was an Oklahoma State park for a long time. It finally lost its status. It's like they didn't have a lot of money to spend anyway, and scientifically it doesn't really hold up, and they're like, we can't really justify this. But it is now a city park, and anyone who ever travels through southeast Oklahoma, you should definitely go check it out. It's fascinating, absolutely fascinating. And it's beautiful country anyway for a drive. 271, 59, any of those state highways, 270 that go down through that area. Absolutely amazing day drives. But we went, explored the Heavener runestone, actually checked it out, tried to talk to a geologist who says he can date. It's a little bit, very controversial, not a little bit, says he can date things on stone, which is generally not possible, named Scott Walter. And it's kind of funny that we invited him to come be on the show, and he was, and probably was too busy to do this, even though he was fascinated with the idea, supposedly. And just 5 years later, he's got his own TV show on the History Channel, and the first thing he does is the Heavener runestone. And even and this is probably me just making connections in my little brain, but in the entrance to that, I think it was America Unearthed or something like that, but in the intro, the opening sequence, it actually says Hidden Histories. And I was like, you mother franker, you stole our idea. Can't prove that, probably didn't, but I will say, there's a lot of interesting little parallels, little clues there. But on this adventure to explore the Heavener runestone, someone local told us that there was, up above the runestone, on the next tier up the mountain, and you had to get access through the state park. At the time, it was still a state park. We actually talked to the governor on that episode. They had to give us access to go up on top of the mountain through that route, but that there was like this rocked-in cave where someone had stacked stones out in front of this cave, and you had to go up. And there was a certain tree you had to find to know where it was. And this cave had been there forever. It's more like a rock house with the stacked stone turned it into sort of a cave situation. Left like an opening that was kind of exactly the size of a doorway. And anyway, you had to find this specific tree that was sticking up well above the bluff line because the cave was beneath the plateau, like the saddle that you had to walk in on. And you had to find this tree, and then you had to find a way down to the tree. And when you found the tree, you found the entrance to the cave because the cave was growing out right in front of the tree. It's a giant, I think it was a pine tree, an enormous old pine tree right there on that bluff face. So we go up and get into this mess. And this backpack sitting next to me was along for that ride. It was carrying equipment, camera gear, audio gear, as, oh God, R.I.P. Jackson Burns, one of Hollywood's not early, but stunt men throughout the 70s and 80s. He was with us along for the ride. He was actually a Heavener local, and he was in, I believe, The Terminator. Or he did stunts, and I believe it was the Terminator or Terminator 2, one of the two. A lot of the famous action films from the 70s and 80s. His company was called Action Jackson Stunts. His name was Jackson Burns. God rest his soul. He passed away a few years ago. But he gets up there. So Jackson and I, just the two of us, go down this crevice. We find the tree finally, and he's like, this is it. We make our way down this crevice. We get to the bottom. The Heavener was Podo Mountain. Podo Mountain is famous for its rattlesnakes. They're huge. Listen, there are pictures down at a lot of the old convenience stores. Maybe not now. It's been 20 years since I lived in that town. But there used to be pictures, and there were pictures back from the 40s and 50s, like when my grandfather lived there and my mom lived there, with people like at the center of town with 8 and 9 foot long rattlesnakes. You may think I'm lying. I am not lying. They're big around as like a man's thigh, right? Its size. They're enormous rattlesnakes. And this is in my mind. The whole time we're going down this bluff face with all this stacked rock. And also copperheads are a thing in Oklahoma. And they're almost probably more terrifying than a rattlesnake because you don't hear them before they kill you. Like, you don't have any warning. And we're working our way along this shelf back towards this cave thing. And I mean, again, this backpack is right there with me. It also has a snake bite kit in it, which I know now is useless and will actually make things worse. Don't ever use a snake bite kit. Outdoors people, don't fall for that crap and buy a snake bite kit. It's totally useless. Actually will make the situation a worse situation. Just leave it be, find a hospital, or prepare to die. One of the two, right? But I've got this backpack, and we're making it along this bluff edge, and all of our thousands of dollars of recording equipment, a big portion of it's in this backpack that's sitting right next to me. We did come across a nest of baby rattlesnakes, but they were 3 feet below us. We were on like a rock shelf that we were working our way under, this kind of undercut of this overhang. And they were like 3 feet below us, and we could see them, and they were skittering around. And I was like, oh, Lord, where's Mama? Where is Mama? It was one of, honestly, the more terrifying experiences of my life. Because Jackson, God rest his soul, was not in great shape. This was like well towards the later parts of his life. I told you, he was a stunt man in the 70s and 80s. This is in 2007 and 8. You know, he's in his probably 50s, mid 50s at this point, and not in the best shape. And I'm like, it's just me and this dude. The rest of the crew's on top of the bluff, right? We went down on this as like a tactical insertion, right? It's just me and him. There's freaking rattlesnake, a nest of rattlesnakes below us, babies everywhere. Don't know where Mama is. God knows if there's copperheads on the side. I'm sure there is. This is very remote. People don't go here every day. This is not a place that's spray painted up with graffiti because it's so fucking hard to get to, right? But we finally make it to this cave entrance, and it was insane. I don't think it had any connection to the runestone. That was why we went exploring there. It's like maybe this is where the person who carved whatever's on the face of that runestone stayed at, because it's just across this ravine. He could have worked his way along this shelf and down the mountain, and it's a perfect view. Y'all, it's so cool. Like, it's an overhang with a rock, like stacked stone rocked face in the front that overlooks the entire Podo River Valley. You can actually see Wister Lake, which is some 14 miles distant on the horizon across the valley. From this vantage point, the runestone, we could see the roof of the enclosure for the runestone itself down below us. I don't know how much further down. I don't know the elevation difference, but it was just down from us on the next kind of shelf down, maybe 3/4 of a mile away as the crow flies across this very deep ravine. And it was so cool. Inside this cave, like, there was actually a natural shelf there that had a lot of charcoal and staining. So clearly someone at some point, could have been somebody 80 years ago, just a local hunter. It could have, and most likely was, indigenous people throughout a long span of history. But who made the stacked stone to actually box it in to be like a little house? I have no idea. And at that time, I wasn't educated enough. History nerd as I've always been, I was not actually educated enough in any one of these fields to have been able to look at that with the critical eye needed to even begin to come up with a hypothesis of, oh, these stacked stones and this could probably indicate it might have been more of like a European American thing, after contact, during exploration, or it's probably indigenous, whatever, or it was indigenous and then co-opted into something by post-contact European explorers. Had no content or context for that, no education for that at the time. Looking back on it, I don't remember it well enough. We've got some video and some pictures, but there's nothing about it that we diagnostically looked at that could even give me a hint now, which is kind of annoying, that I didn't, take better notes or something. But again, we're trying not to die, and there's rattlesnake babies, and there's God knows what else. It wouldn't have surprised me if some giant, like, I don't know, phoenix or other mythical creature had descended upon us, some giant Garuda, and taken us off the side of that mountain. It wouldn't have shocked me. Right? It just felt like that. It felt dangerous because it actually kind of was. And Jackson went into the cave. I poked my head in because there wasn't room for the two of us in there. But there's like this natural shelf with all this charcoal where fires would have been built at some point. And what's interesting, if you built a fire on that shelf, it would come out the crack on top of the mountain. So it was a perfect way to hide. You could go up in there and camp out, and no one's going to see your fire because you're in an enclosed space. Someone was hunting for you, right? But also the smoke's coming out half a mile away through cracks and fissures in this cave system. It's not actually coming out where you're at. So you couldn't see a smoke plume, and you could get into within like maybe a half a mile of the cave entrance that's well hidden behind this enormous tree on the rock face. And off of this bluff that there's no way to even know. There was no indicator. It'd have been a perfect hideout, which actually is probably what it was in retrospect, but it would have been perfect. So cool. We didn't find any artifacts inside. We didn't find any carvings, which is what we were after, looking for carvings that could have indicated a link to the runestone itself, like some Norse script from, I believe, what is it, Old Ogum, or Elder Futhark, and Younger Futhark, and I'm pronouncing that wrong, I'm certain. But it's two different time spans. It's like 1400 AD and like 1200, or it's 1200 and 800. There's a 400-year gap between these two ancient scripts that are represented on the rock face, which is part of what makes it so enigmatic and not make any sense as being genuine or authentic. But we were looking for any kind of symbols that would have matched that, right? Which we did not find. But that was one of the single, probably most adventurous things I've ever done, and really dangerous. Like, I didn't even go into the full details of how narrow this rock shelf was, that we could have fallen down into these little critter, nests of baby rattlesnakes and then rolled down the side of the mountain. Like, it was sketchy. And to top it all off, this was, I believe, late August, if I recall correctly. A freaking thunderstorm, like a squall line, came ripping across the Poto River Valley at us. And we're on the side of this bluff face. The guys above us are radioing us. They're like, you guys need to get back up here. This storm is coming fast. And Jackson and I are on this bluff face, digging around in this cave. And we look back across the valley, and you can actually see a wall of water just coming at us so fast and so hard. I mean, like, we sat there for just a couple of minutes and it covered half the valley. That's 7 miles. Like, it was moving fast. And we ended up getting slammed by a squall line thunderstorm on the side of a rock face in a little bit of an overhang shelter, which, for any of you that know, that's the single most dangerous place you could possibly be in an electrical storm or a storm that's producing a lot of lightning, because the lightning will attract to the rock face. We were in the worst position we could possibly be in, and we're getting soaked, and we're trying to bag all this equipment that's worth thousands of dollars and pack it away in this backpack and get the hell off the side of that mountain and back up to the vehicles on top of the bluff. Yeah, it was a whole ordeal. And this backpack was there for the whole thing. And it was actually this backpack's very first adventure. That, my friends, is the foundation for a long and fruitful friendship with a piece of gear, if it lasts, which this did. In this same year that we're shooting for Hidden Histories, there were, I don't know, what did we get, 11 or 12 episodes out before we moved on and started on The Fringe, which became more our personal thing as a production crew, Possum Valley Entertainment. God, we had so many. Oh, here's one, the Bracketville shoot. We went down to Bracketville, Texas, and it's funny how we come around full circle, because now I'm at Fort Smith as a ranger, and I've been there as a volunteer for 3.5 years, or a little over 3 years. Back in 07, 08, we went down to Fort Smith, and we were looking at the story of Henry Starr, who's a lesser-known outlaw in the annals of Wild West history. But where we ended up going with that is we ended up in Bracketville, Texas, which is like maybe 30 miles from the Mexican border. And the reason we ended up in Bracketville, Texas, was so that we could shoot in an old jail cell on a film set, and it was a very special film set. Have any of you, and any of you of an older generation, or my generation even, and it was older than me, but I'm aware of it, the Alamo that John Wayne filmed and directed. It's a very famous show, I believe, or movie, I believe is from the 60s is probably when it was filmed. I'd have to look into it. 50s or 60s. John Wayne directed it, filmed it. I got to direct and host a TV show that shot on the same film set that the Alamo was shot on, that John Wayne walked around and directed on. That was like a highlight of my life. And I'm not even like a John Wayne dude. Like, I'm not all, he hated indigenous Americans, super bigoted. I am not a John Wayne worshiper like so many Southern folk are. But he is an extremely famous actor and filmmaker. And at that time, especially, to have been able to walk a set and filmed and actually directed filming on a set that he built to do one of the more famous movies of its time, that's cool. And this backpack was along for the whole ride. Had all of my necessities, had all of my gear to film, all of my notes, all of my stuff. This backpack was there. And while we were in Brackenville, we got to do a couple of cool things, man. I think it was that trip we were down towards Fredericksburg as well. And we were able to go up on Enchanted Rock, which I have talked about, I think, in 2 different episodes on here. This backpack was full of my gear to go see Enchanted Rock, to go to all the breweries and the wineries. Because you roll into any town with a film crew, you don't even have to show them press credentials, man, especially, I guess, in those days. You come in with a camera, big old camera. You go in with this professional looking camera. Everyone's like, hey, let us give you free beer and stuff. We'll be in your show. Can you talk about us? Here's free stuff. This, like, they roll out the red carpet for you. And it was so crazy because I was like, not only do I feel like an imposter, we kind of are. Because we're making a show and it's going to distribute somewhere, but it's not going to be on ABC. It's not going to be on Discovery or the History Channel or whatever. It's, like, this is some online content. It ended up airing in Eastern Europe. It's like 17 countries in Eastern Europe for a couple of years. But they didn't care. You got a camera, you get all the stuff. We got some really cool swag out of those deals. So we got to roll around Fredericksburg. For all of you who listen to this for places to go and ideas, Brackenville, Texas, you can't go to that set of the Alamo anymore. It's privately held and it can be visited by special arrangement, but I don't know all the details. If you have to be someone important or be a part of a big group, you can look into that for yourself. But Brackenville's a really cool place to go kick it in super extreme South Texas. Fredericksburg is a beautiful place in the hill country. Enchanted Rock is in the hill country of Texas. The hill country of Texas is gorgeous, y'all. If you want to make a road trip through the hill country and then kick it all the way on over to Big Bend and see the Guadalupe Mountains, by all means, that would be a really cool idea for you guys. But this backpack, my gear friend here, was along for all of those trips. God, there were so many things that we did on Hidden Histories, but then we rolled into On the Fringe. And you know what? This is a good spot to cut for the commercial break, and we're going to insert our ad partner here. And we'll come back after the break, and we'll get into some of the explorations that this backpack kept me alive on with our On the Fringe crew. But then on through the story arc of this backpack as it got graduated down into other roles in my life as my life changed. And that's kind of the idea here, is we get to follow this whole story arc. And in a really interesting way, I realize it's come back around full circle in a very fulfilling way. So hopefully I'll remember to make that key point at the end of the next half of the show. We'll be right back after the sponsor break. What is up, all of you wayward souls? I want to tell you guys about our newest sponsor, Bendetti Optics, a brand based right here in the good old US of A, Portland, Oregon, to be exact. And I bought my first pair of Bendetti sunglasses about 1.5 years ago and fell in love with them, so much so that I got online and ordered a couple of more pair. And when I did, there was a small shipping snafu, an order fulfillment snafu, and I got on the phone, gave them a call, and guess what? I get a call back from who? One of the big men themselves, right there in Portland, from the top of the chain. Have a great conversation, and we end up starting this great relationship we have. They more than made right the little snafu that occurred, And I am now a huge proponent of them because I can tell you from personal experience, they are good people. And they're trying to compete with the big boys out there coming in at a price point of about $40, but using the exact same frame material, TR90, and the same polarization process as the big guys. As it turns out, something I think we are already probably knew in our hearts, when you buy big name sunglasses, you're buying a big name, not necessarily any more quality than you can get somewhere else, like at Bendetti Optics. They have 29 different styles. They have multiple polarization options for whatever climate you happen to live in. And they back it up with like this lifetime guarantee that if your dog eats your sunglasses, it doesn't matter how you break them, send it back in with a check to cover shipping and handling and you're golden. You got a new pair on the way. These guys are truly trying to do it right. And they have this philosophy that a really good pair of sunglasses should not cost you so much that you are afraid to wear them. And I think all of us outdoorsmen can relate to that. So if you guys, like me, are very practical and like to get more bang for your buck and wear some great looking sunglasses, check out BendettiOptics.com. That's BendeTTI optics.com. Or you can go over to Instagram /BendettiOptics. And that I highly suggest, whether you buy a pair or not, just to check out the cutest pupper you'll ever see modeling sunglasses. Once again, that's BendettiOptics.com. And make sure and let them know Wayward Stories sent you. And welcome back. Thank you guys for sticking around through our sponsor break. As I was taking my little break there and getting a swig of some water, I started thinking about, like, I don't think I fully mentioned, like, when you look at this bag, I got interrupted by the kids playing football, but I had it up here where you guys could see it. I'll pull it up again. You look at it. It's not in terrible shape. Like, even now at 18 years old and all of the modifications it's been through, which we're going to talk about in a bit, why there's straps cut off of here and some of the iterations it has performed in its life. The main reason that it's kind of reached the end of its useful life is because the zippers have finally started to kind of dry rot and break, where like this front flap won't really stay shut anymore. I mean, it's going to go to the wall, but it's crazy to me how good of shape it's still in after 18 years. That's really a testament to something that has to do with longevity, because again, this thing's been through it. When you think about a backpack, think about this. How many times, especially if you use it heavily, do you throw it off your back onto the ground? You know, oh, I got to go do this. Got to go do that. Oh, we made it to camp. Oh, whatever. These things get beat to pieces. They don't just like set, you know, in a nice cushy little place in your car and then going, well, for a lot of you people, they do. I see you posers out there. But if you're really using this stuff, it gets beat to death. Look at the wear, which of course you guys that are just listening can't see it, but the bottom has got all this wear and there's still no hole there. This thing is still really solid. It's just the zippers are kind of useless now, which makes it kind of useless. Man, that bag, Magellan, I might have to go back and see if Magellan's still like a thing, man. If they're still making stuff like this, I may have to get some new Magellan gear. Anyway, I'm reminiscing about days gone by with a very gear friend of mine, right? But let's get on to this part of tonight's show. We're going to get into, like, with On the Fringe. I mentioned that I have my Great American or North American Bigfoot search patch on there. It's lived on there since the day I went on that freaking Bigfoot search. That was an On the Fringe thing. On the Fringe picked up where Hidden Histories let off. We checked out on Hidden Histories because we were kind of getting screwed. And my idea had kind of gotten co-opted. The idea originally was, let's go after all these cool little, you know, it was legend trippy idea, like before legend tripping was even a thing on TV. Let's go after all these cool little unknown things, these little sidetrack, you know, there's actually a podcast or a YouTube channel called Sidetrack Adventures with a guy named Steve. I've mentioned him before. He does really cool stuff. Steve, if you ever hear any of my stuff, I respect you, dude. I'm super jealous. Like, I don't know how the heck you afford to, like, I don't know, not work and just go on road trips constantly because you have to for all the stuff you do. Super jelly. But That's also because I wish I was you. He's got a really cool show, and he does exactly what I always wanted to do. What my idea for Hidden Histories was. Let's find all these little side tracks, these little side quests everywhere that aren't a part of the everyday pop culture, and go explore. And that's what Hidden Histories was supposed to be about. And it kind of got co-opted into a show that was just about a bunch of historical reenactments. Because there was logic there. We had a horse wrangler with a bunch of horses. This guy'd been on, had horses on The Patriot. He was even in The Patriot with Mel Gibson. He was one of the guys we got tied in through Jackson Burns and some of these other folks through our early film work. He was on The Patriot. He had horses in The Patriot. He had horses in all kinds of things. And so we had a bunch of horses and a bunch of period gear and a bunch of reenactors, and they thought we could sell to the History Channel, so they just kept coming up with ideas for stuff that was crap that was already out there and had been done to death on the History Channel. It's like, well, we have the stuff. We got the land. We went all over Texas. He had friends all over Texas and western Oklahoma. We spent God knows how many weeks on the road in Texas. Guys, you can drive across Texas. There were days it felt like you could drive in Texas for a week and not be out of Texas. Like, you talk about open country. We went all over Texas filming at all these different ranches, and we do all these recreations, and it was cool stuff. But the heart, the inspiration of the show was gutted from it, right? And we weren't getting paid worth of crap. And, that's part of being in film and trying to make it. We weren't established, but we were like, there were some things that happened. We were like, enough's enough. And we quit. But then middleman from Houston calls us up and says, hey, this network, they're still looking for more content. I get you guys weren't happy. They'll be fine. They'll go on and do their thing. Do you have any other ideas? And I was like, let's do this other idea that I've got, which is On the Fringe, which is the same dang idea, but has more of a paranormal bent. Let's go legend tripping. I've said this before. You guys that have been around all along are like, Justin, we've heard it. But there's new listeners every month, guys. So I got to sum up some of this occasionally. But the idea was like legend tripping. Let's go find the crybaby bridges and let's go do what you're supposed to do in that particular area. And again, this all comes around full circle in such a crazy way as now I'm professionally doing exactly that. It's folklore studies, cultural anthropology, all of that stuff overlaps. At that time, it was just a fascination of mine. It's like, let's go do exactly what the local people do. Every crybaby bridge is different and has a little bit different story, but they all have the exact same theme, right? All of them. Every freaking one of them. So it was like, let's go and let's just do it. And let's film us doing it and let's see what happens. And that's how we ended up doing On the Fringe. And it got us into some crazy stuff. This Bigfoot expedition in particular, I have talked about on some of our spooky season episodes. But just to kind of give it a quick refresher, because this backpack was out there with us in the middle of the night, in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the Ouachita Mountains, where the population density is less than one person for 100 square miles. I actually did this math once for a whole different thing. It's mostly national forest, and we're out there with some of the top Bigfoot researchers in all of the world in 2009. I've actually got a really cool it's Honobia, but Honobia Bigfoot Conference Festival flyer signed by some of the most famous people in the field. R. Scott Nelson was an Army cryptographer who took it seriously and thought there might be something to the vocalizations of Bigfoot. Jeff Meldrum, he's a leading anthropologist, an actual physical leading anthropologist. I believe he's at Washington State University, and he takes it seriously. And he looks at the tracks and the different things and the dermal ridges and all this stuff. And he's like, there is something, because these tracks we have are literally bipedal something tracks. And you can only get that effect. You can't do it by making like a wooden track that you put on the, that you carve and just stamp in the ground. You can't create that because the flex is not there. You can see the flex. You can see the rolling of the foot. And this is a foot that's 3 times the size of a human foot. Whatever. He's famous. An actual physiologist, an anthropologist. All these different guys. And we got to go on a Bigfoot hunt with them in the middle of the night. And it was one of the weirdest, funniest, most fascinating things I've ever done. And this backpack was there, carrying everything that I hoped would keep me alive and that we needed to record on my back for the entire adventure. I think I, again, have mentioned this before, but what that amounted to that night is us going into the woods on foot with all of these guys who took it very, very seriously. Which how seriously do I take it? I don't know. I leave the door open for anything to be possible, and I would love for there to be a Bigfoot, and that's where I kind of leave it. But I also don't check my brain with my baggage. Like, you got to be a critical thinker, right? But they're out there with this like proprietary gear that they didn't want us to show on camera. But what it was a big stereo, like from the 90s, late 90s, that had a CD with the Sierra sounds, which is the most famous recordings of sounds in the wilderness that cannot be explained because we don't know of any animal that makes those noises. It doesn't match any known vocalization of any animal. But we can't also prove it was Bigfoot, except for the guys who recorded it claimed they were being attacked by Bigfoots up in the Sierra Mountains. I don't remember if it was Sierra Madre or whatever, but it was in the Sierras, and they're called the Sierra Sounds. And the enigma of those things is that there is no animal on record. I mean, now you've even got apps on our phone that can tell us what kind of bird is making that song, right? That is a heavily studied aspect of natural biology, is the vocalizations of animals, and no one out there, no expert anywhere can say what the hell made that noise, right? So it's a real noise that's unexplained, and these guys claimed it was made by Bigfoot, Bigfeetin. How do you do multiple Bigfi? I don't know. Multiple Bigfoot. And that's the only evidence we have is they claim that's what it is. Scientists can't explain what it actually is, so it's left as an enigma as maybe this is what Bigfoot sounds like. And so these guys have got it on a CD on this rig of an old external frame backpack with a like 1997 lo-fi stereo strapped to it with speakers, playing these Sierra sounds out into the wilderness and using big sticks to knock on trees because Bigfoot you apparently can, or is supposedly, talks to each other, communicates through knocking on trees. Interesting story. I've heard tree knocking in the woods, but I never knew at the time I heard it that it was supposedly something that had to do with Bigfoot. Anyway, that was a really interesting night, long night, late night, in the middle of the woods, and this backpack was my companion and kept my snacks and kept my little tummy from rumbling and kept me warm with the things I kept in it. Again, a true, very true gear friend. Other things we did our own Bigfoot search on the Falk Monster. I mentioned that recently. This backpack was along for the ride. The Coney Anacostia, the Cowie Anacostia, the search for the Choctaw Little People. I've told you guys that story, and I won't reiterate it, but that night, we're out there on that mountain setting up tents and gear and everything we needed to spend the night looking for legendary spirit people of the Choctaw Nation. And this backpack is what I was living out of. It's what my tent was strapped to. It's what my sleeping bag was strapped to. It's what everything I had to keep me going that night was this bag. So you see the theme, the arc of the story, how closely, like how attached we can become to a piece of gear when it's there for us, especially when it's pieces of gear that actually aid us in what we do and what we want to do, and it's just there for longevity. And this is like a big jump. I mean, this is straight out of the box for this backpack, man, because all of this happened in like a 1.5 span. So it really launched out of the gate doing some really cool stuff that's really formative stuff for me in my adulthood. I was only 28 when all this is kicking off, right? I'm 45 now. And one other story, Cowan Branch, north of Dover, Arkansas, way up in the sticks on private property. There's a little creek, which the creek goes through multiple properties, but it's called the Cowan Branch. Our editor for the show, his father-in-law, or soon-to-be father-in-law, I think it was his father-in-law, it was his girlfriend's dad, one of the two, owned a piece of property down there, and he had done all this historical research because he found graves on top of this really tall hill, mound-like hill in the middle of the forest. Did all this research on the names and came up with this whole backstory about this family that was split in half by the Civil War, with half of the brothers, or X amount of the brothers, being pro-Confederate, the other half being pro-Union, and treachery that ensued, and people that died by being lured home by mom's fried chicken, no joke, and spent 7 days under a bluff next to a spring, passing away. One of the brothers did after he had been bushwhacked, literally jumped by gorillas, which were his family, after he was lured home because mom was going to make fried chicken. And we're out there exploring this freaking mound with all these graves on top of it in the middle of the forest, in the middle of the night, down a road you could barely drive down. And I'm camping out of this backpack, waking up in my solo tent to a thunderstorm being poured on and it lightning outside. And I'm snuggled up in my sleeping bag. The rain is pelting my tent. I'm praying I don't get struck by lightning, or the tree that I'm underneath doesn't get struck by lightning. This bag was there. And that was extremely adventurous part of our adventures. And then, though, On the Fringe comes to an end eventually, right? On the Fringe ends because, well, you can't not make money forever, right? Airing in Europe doesn't do a lot for you, especially Eastern Europe. I'm like, I don't even know if those people could speak, like, English, most of them, because you're in the, like, old Soviet bloc countries when you're talking about Eastern Europe, right? We were getting, like, I get a royalty check for like $1.67 every few weeks or few months or something. Like, it made no money. You know, bankruptcy's a thing. So we didn't get to go all the way through with that. When that happened, this backpack just became primarily my river bag because it's made of this really thin, quick dry mesh material. It's not mesh. It's actually not mesh. But whatever material this is made out of dries quickly and drains well. And so it became, because it's just big enough if you know how to pack and you're not out there trying to glamp, this is the perfect size bag, or was at least, to strap to a kayak with everything I needed for solo kayak trips, like overnight solos. This is the bag that was with me when I did my 3-night solo down the Buffalo, which was like this whole event for me. The Buffalo Wilderness, once you get past the upper reaches of the Buffalo where everyone camps at, like, you know, Stills Creek and all these different things, Still Creek, there's no one there. It's a national scenic river. There's no one out there. 3 days worth of heading down the river by yourself. It's a little bit scary at times. It's extremely peaceful. Like, that's when you get onto something like river time. Like, you ever heard people talk about river time or lake time or whatever? And all it means is once you get past like a day out there and you're not messing with your phone constantly, you lose a certain amount of track of time, and time decompresses from like how fast it moves in our everyday life. And then suddenly you're like, I don't even know what time it is and I don't care. How many days have passed? I don't know. How many days are left? Doesn't really matter. Like, it's a weird decompression of time, and probably more how we biologically naturally would render time if we didn't live in this psychotic world that we live in. But this was on that 3-day overnight. This was also on one that I believe has probably been talked about. I feel like I've told this story probably back 3 years ago in an episode called Yak Packing 101, which go back and listen to that if you're interested in how to backpack on your kayak and spend nights out there, how to like choose gear and how to basically be able to fit stuff light enough, small enough onto a kayak to do overnights on a basic kind of standard kayak that you could get anywhere, nothing specialized. So, and this story probably got told in that episode, but I am going to reiterate it again because it's been a long time and it's a great story. That was an overnight float trip that this backpack took me on with a boatload of people who had no business doing overnight float trips. Like, they were trying to glamp and they were in rafts, and it ended up being extremely cold that night, right off the river's edge. No one was really ready. That's the trip that I lost my awesome shoes on, my awesome water shoes, because I was so cold. Everyone was so cold. It ended up so cold. And those water shoes, I was like, it was so stupid too, because it was done. It didn't make any sense. It's like my brain wasn't really thinking straight. I wasn't being logical. It's like, it doesn't matter if you dry out those shoes, right? Once you put them on in the morning, even if they're cold for a half a second, as soon as you step into that ice cold water, they're just as cold. But my brain was like, I want those shoes to dry out. And I put them too close to the fire, and they're made of a material that could melt, and they freaking melted. They were an amazing pair of water shoes. But this adventure was the adventure where our camp was invaded by cows in the middle of the night. And the way that I woke up to this happening We were apparently on the edge of someone's land. I woke up not long after. I'd really fallen asleep, I don't think. And I was in my single tent, and because I had to camp on this weird little trail, which turns out it was a cattle trail. That's why it was a weird little trail where it was. But it's the only place I could get the stakes in the ground. And it didn't allow me to really pull out this bivy tent fully. And so I couldn't get the flap shut completely. I could get the mosquito net shut, but not the flap. A little single person tent, kind of like a mummy tent. And I suddenly awoke feeling really hot and really stinky air in my face. And as I'm awaking, imagine coming out of this state of sleep. And you've been there before. We've all been there before. Imagine this. And you realize that you're looking up. And it took a minute to even figure this part out. What the hell am I looking up at? But above me, I'm looking up the nose of a cow. Now, that may sound funny to you, but imagine being in a mummy bag, zipped up to your neck, with a 900 to 1,200 pound animal standing over the top of you, and it has no idea what you are, right? And you're in its trail where it needs to walk. That may have been one of the single most terrifying instances of my life, realizing how close I was to death right there. All it had to do was step on my head or my chest, and it was basically game over, right? But fortunately, I was of sound enough mind to not panic, and I took a deep breath, and I do remember saying, "You better not step on me, you fucker." Which is sort of funny in retrospect, and why I chose those words, I have no idea. But I think when it heard me speak, it went, and then it backed up. And as soon as it backed up and turned, I came out of that sleeping bag and out of that tent in an instant. It couldn't have taken more than a second or two. It was adrenaline. Okay. And I come out of that tent and I'm standing up and I feel safer. I've worked cows in my life. I grew up around those stupid things. I feel much safer that I'm standing up. I know how to get them away from me if I need to in this circumstance. But I look around and there are cows throughout our entire camp. There's like 5 or 6 tents everywhere, stacked out on this rock bluff face. People are trying to hold them up. People aren't even using stakes, right? They've got rocks in the corners of their tents. It was a whole thing. And there are cows literally milling through the entirety of camp. And I'm the only person awake at this point because I was accosted by a cow at point blank range, right? And so I start going, guys, because I didn't want to yell. I didn't want to spook cows and go running over everyone else and kill everyone. So I started slowly working my way around and waking people up. And suddenly everyone's standing out in their night clothes in the freezing cold, surrounded by freaking cows walking through our camp. That was one of the most memorable experiences on an overnight float trip I can that I'll ever have. And this backpack was there along for the ride. This point, that backpack is pushing, God, I don't know. It's at least a few years old at that point. But it becomes my primary float bag for the longest time. This is the purpose that it serves, is it goes on the rivers because it drains fast, it dries fast, it's got multiple compartments on it. That's the other thing about gear that really works for you, is it's usually perfectly set up where it's like, oh, this pouch holds this important thing to me that I have to have. And these pouches, this big compartment is perfect for my sleeping bag or my rain fly or my bedroll or whatever. This compartment is perfect for this. And it's like, it's just got all the things you need in all the right places. It's just perfect. And this shows the scars of it becoming a river bag. One of the things that I mentioned earlier was that if you look at it, lots of the straps are missing and they're cut off. And of course, anyone not watching on YouTube can't see this, but a lot of the little straps, like the chest strap, the waist strap that would be perfect for hiking, when I knew I wasn't ever going to hike with this again and it became my primary river bag, these got cut off because they're not only extra weight, which is not a lot of weight, but when you're yak packing, it's even more important than like ultralight hiking that this thing weigh as little as possible. But on top of that, there were just flappy appendages that were always in the way and getting hung on crap. Right? So it bears those scars of its change of purpose in my life, its change of application in my world, and it becomes a river bag. And it served that purpose so well for many years. But then And I mean, guys, we're talking thousands of hours or thousands of miles on these rivers. And I'm not exaggerating that. I've had 3 different kayaks in my adult life. And I used to keep track of mileage on them through like halfway through my second kayak. And at that point, I was over 2,500 river miles. And it was just for fun. It wasn't anything. It wasn't any like, medals I was trying to win or any kind of patch for somewhere. It was just because I was curious. Over time, how many river miles have we done? We used to float multiple times a summer. I used to do a lot of solos. And it'd be like, that was a 22-mile trip. That was a 37-mile trip. That was a 9-mile trip. And I would just keep it on a notebook that I always kept in my shop, which was my garage. And I'd always just write in 9 or 11 or 22. And I added it up at one point, and this would have been 2012. This is 12, 13 years ago. I added that up. And I was like well over 2,800 miles. Somewhere in there. And I don't know how much I floated since then. Like, this bag has done 18 years of hard physical labor. But then it gets even more physical. 3 years ago, almost 4 years ago now, because we're going to roll around to May real soon, I got involved in archaeology. Yeah? And this bag became my primary tool bag for archaeological digs, because it had a pouch where I could keep a medical kit, a trauma kit, which has come in handy more than once out there in an archaeological dig. Y'all, a trowel, when you sharpen a trowel to properly clean scrape a unit in archaeology, it's razor sharp metal. You can literally kill someone with it. Literally. Not exaggerating, you could kill someone with it. It's that sharp. People get cut by a lot of things, and that trauma kit has stopped many a bleed that lived in this backpack. This backpack is one of those things, and that's the thing about a backpack that can bond you to it so closely. Like, we got a lot of gear. Like, there's other pieces of gear I have that have been along for the ride. I've talked about this before, my Leatherman Wave. This is one of my most precious possessions because it's one of the only things I have left that my mother gave to me. My mom knew how to buy me a gift. She knew I was practical. She knew the stuff I couldn't spend money on or wouldn't spend money on for myself. And this multi-tool has served me since actually about the same time frame. I think 08 or 09 is when she got me this. This thing's 15 years old. It actually had a break. You heard about it on Overnight Rescue on the Ozark Highland. And Leatherman honored their lifetime warranty and fixed the brake on it. This thing has been to the top of mountains. It's been to Mount Sherman in Colorado, a 14er, right? It's gone everywhere, and it has saved my bacon on many a day on a FedEx route, on a Big Purple route somewhere. It saved my bacon when I was a VRC as a records courier. This thing, I use it literally almost daily for either the pliers or the knife. This is a piece of gear like I'm talking about. This backpack, even more so in a sense, because you're living out of it. It has medicine you need. It had to keep you from having a miserable trip. It's got ibuprofen. It's got Tylenol. It's a backpack. It's got your bedroll. This is how you're going to sleep. It's got your hydration pack. It's how you're going to drink water. Food, all your snacks. What are you going to eat? Your dehydrated friggin' apples, whatever. A backpack is literally a tiny tenement. It is a house you carry with you and you live out of. When you're doing stuff that's fairly extreme, because hiking through the woods for 2 days is fairly extreme. Solo kayaking is fairly extreme because you're living off of nothing. All you have to keep you alive is what you have in your backpack and, say, in a kayak situation, in your kayak. It's not much. So that piece of gear becomes a very, very dear friend, doesn't it? When it's the way you stay alive. And so through all these archaeological excavations, I've completed 3 now that I've been a part of, not completed myself, of course. It was my tool bag, and it had our first aid kit, and it had multiple snacks that I had in there. It had all my sinus medication because I have such horrible issues with my sinuses. And when you're in there digging in dusty holes, your whole day is ruined really fast when you end up with a freaking headache, a throbbing headache because your sinuses have dried out and clogged up. All the medications I needed to keep me from having a miserable day and actually enjoying the thing that I was doing would live in this bag. So for 3 consecutive years, it's gone out there on archaeological digs and baked in the sun and covered in mud and dirt and dust and cow dung out in some of these pastures where you're digging, doing your archaeology. Like, so many archaeological sites set under cow pastures. They just do. It's farmers. It's what they did in the 1800s. Oh, look, an awesome mound. Let's plow it under. It's usable field, right? That field or that mound is keeping me from another half acre of crops or enough half acre of grazing for my cows or whatever. Let's mow it down. So a lot of archaeology is under cow pastures today. So this thing has been covered in cow poo. It has been through the ringer. It has been everything that you've heard me talk about for the last 5 years on this podcast. Any of my old adventures, any of the river trips, the Kings River overnight river trip, one of my Buffalo overnights where a freaking water moccasin made my kayak home, all of those trips, all of the stories up until now, this backpack was along for the ride. And even when I went to New Hampshire on probably the largest road trip of my life, definitely the largest solo road trip of my life, just 2 weeks ago, I didn't need to take this bag with me, but I did. Because I kind of knew the end of its life was coming, because it's just, again, the zippers aren't working. It's not a lot I can do with it. It's just not serving any purposes anymore that it fits. At the moment, at least, you never know. It might get resurrected for something else, but I kind of doubt it. And I knew it was running out of time. So me, being the weirdo I am, I thought it'd be kind of symbolic. Surely there's some stuff I need to carry that can go in and out of the hotel room or whatever that I can put in this bag and take it on one last grand hurrah. And so I did. So this backpack has seen this enormous story arc in and of itself, but it's also been my story arc where I started one way trying to be a certain thing, which is someone who just goes out and lives and adventures and explores and learns and tries to uncover stuff and share it with other people, and realizing you can't do that way and finding a different way to do it, which comes around full circle to me going to school to be able to get the chance to do that. And here I sit before you today, and I am now a park ranger. And for 3 years, I've been able to learn. I've been able to adventure. I've been able to explore. I've been able to tell these stories. I get to do anthropology. I get to do folklore and myths. I get to make this podcast better for all of the education I've been able to receive doing all these other things. And all of it has followed this arc that this backpack was there for all of. And now we come to its final days where it's like it just doesn't serve a purpose anymore. And I'm replacing it with a new backpack that will serve many of the purposes I need it to even better. And that should be here in the mail tomorrow. And it's just interesting. Like last episode, we were talking about, the turning of a page, changing of the guard, moving forward into the next half of my life. And it's kind of just feels sort of meaningful to me. And maybe it's only meaningful to me that this backpack was sort of there for the entire trajectory of this story, and it's sort of at the end of its life now, and it is time to maybe turn the page from it too. And I've got a new backpack coming in probably tomorrow, according to the tracking, and this guy, it's time for it to go, and it's going to go up on the shelf, or go up on the wall. Pride of place. Again, I'm going to take that little Bigfoot patch off of there, and I'm going to put it somewhere here in the studio. And I just thought it was kind of a cool story and a way to bring out an archetypal idea to all of you guys. If you stop and you look at yourself and you've been living any kind of life where it's got any kind, doesn't even have to have adventure in it, but that does kind of lend itself to this. You probably have something that's been there all along. I've got a water bottle right now that's only about 5 years old, but it has seen hell and it's done everything, and it's reaching the point it may have to be retired because I literally can't set it on a flat surface anymore because it falls off. It just falls over because it fell off a 30-foot cliff somewhere in Missouri some time ago, and it bent the bottom so bad it still holds water and keeps it cold, but it won't stand up. And so it's like time that it may have to get retired. But we all have little pieces of gear that almost become like our little safety blankets in a way. They become friends to us. They become very dear friends. Like I said, gear friends. My gearest friend, dare I say. And so I just wanted to bring that idea out to you guys. Maybe think about some of your stuff. Maybe it's even just kind of in the same vein. It's just being more mindful about your life. When you look at the things around you and you appreciate them for what they are and you do things more meaningfully with more mindful intention, life is just fuller. It's more enjoyable. I think we get more out of it. when we look at life that way. And I thought this would be a really great way to kind of bring that idea out. So I think we've come to the end of this episode. We definitely are in over an hour. I could have talked for a long time about a lot more stories, but there's not really any need. What I would like to say to finish up tonight's episode is Christmas is upon us. Now is a great time for you guys to start thinking about a Christmas road trip or new adventures or new traditions you need to make. If this is one of those times of year that's particularly hard for you, I want to go ahead and put it into this episode. I will probably drop a special message right before Christmas like I did last year. But right now is a good time to be thinking about, what are you going to do next week? Maybe you don't have a lot of money. Maybe you've got plenty of money. It doesn't matter. There's something you can find to do. And here's the key. You're not finding something to do because, oh, woe is me. I don't have family, or I don't have this, or someone abandoned me, and this is what I'm left with. It's you doing the opposite of that. It's you empowering yourself and saying, here were the cards that were dealt me, and here's how I'm going to turn them into something better, because I'm a human being and I'm alive and I deserve to be happy too, simply because I'm alive, right? It's not a status that's bestowed upon you about, you've done this and this and so likes you, therefore you're good enough to enjoy life. No, you were brought into this world without your consent. Nobody consulted you and said, do you want to be born into this mess? Just because you're alive, you have value, you matter, and you have a right to be happy. So now's a good time to be thinking about how to flip the script on your Christmas holiday if you are one of the folks that this time of year is particularly hard for. And I do want to say, if anyone needs to talk, mywaywardstory@gmail.com is a good way to get in touch with me. And then I can even give you my phone number if you particularly really need to talk. And I'm not like being a fake friend. I'll be your real friend. And I have a lot more time now to do that school is over. So if you need to talk, don't feel alone and don't hesitate to reach out. mywaywardstory@gmail.com is where we can start. For everyone else, if you want to check out anything else we do, I mentioned at the top of the show, TikTok, Instagram, all the different things, waywardstory.com. And I hope for all the rest of you that perhaps Christmas is the most wonderful time of the year for you, that you have a wonderful Christmas. It's coming up fast. I hope you're taking the time to slow down, enjoy your holiday season, enjoy your family. Yeah, man, it's right around the corner, and we're going to be on to a whole new year, and for me, a whole new life. So things are happening, and I can't wait till we speak again. I definitely have another episode in mind for the next episode. I'm not sure when we'll get it out, but it'll definitely be sometime after Christmas, maybe around the start of the new year. Until we meet again, you guys, get out there, have fun, find new adventures, go about wandering, go about wondering, and feel free to get in touch and tell me all about your wandering. Until next time, you guys remember, be good to each other.